Hi, everybody. Welcome to our live, welcome to our live virtual real estate practice area info and networking session. My name is Albert from Summer Associate Hub, and I'm proud to have all of you here. As is the case with many transactional practices, real estate is a common practice in Big Law, but not very well understood by 1Ls, primarily because the 1L curriculum revolves around reading and analyzing cases, which is very litigation focused, and not so much around contract drafting and negotiation. I know what you're thinking. Property is also litigation focused, does not convey what real estate practice is like. So don't at me in the Q&A telling me about property. So we put together this session to help you understand what real estate practice means, the different types of real estate practice, and how to position yourself for a career in this area, so you can make better decisions, decide if it's for you, and stand out in the recruiting process by understanding the terminology and speaking the language. This real estate showcase is part of our Summer Associate Hub live virtual practice area series, where students can learn about what it's actually like to work in Big Law in different practice areas and prepare for the recruiting process. This is a great panel of attorneys. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. We have a wide set of perspectives from attorneys with different specialties within real estate, different locations around the US, and different types of law firms. So the agenda is as follows. We'll have a panel discussion featuring our attorneys from Fried Frank, Troutman Pepper, and Alan Matkins. That will be about 30 to 40 minutes, including Q&A. After the panel discussion, each firm will host a separate Zoom room for those who want to join, ask questions, or listen to hear more about the firm. In the meantime, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions for the panel generally, and any good questions we get, we'll tee them up at the end. Before we wrap up the panel discussion, the best part about all these sessions is some prize raffles for firm swag and other gifts. So thank you to the firms for sponsoring those. We'll pop all the information in the chat of how you can sign up for that. You have to be present to win at the end, so we'll be calling your name out live on the air, so don't go anywhere. All the information about the breakout rooms, the raffle, and any other links that would be helpful, we're going to put those in the chat, and you can make sure to keep an eye on that to get that information. So before we jump in, very quickly, what is Summer Associate Hub? Summer Associate Hub is a free content and resource hub for law students embarking on the 1L and 2L recruiting process. I'm a former law student and Big Law associate. We know here from our own experience how hard it is as a 1L to understand what it's really like to work at a law firm. Our platform, summerassociatehub.com, has blog posts, podcast episodes, short video tutorials, interactive exercises, interviews with attorneys, and other content to help you learn about practice areas and prepare for the recruiting process. You also know about our live virtual programs because you're watching one right now. And we also have a ton of awesome programs scheduled for the spring semester. The ones that have already happened are recorded in our video library, which is definitely recommend watching those. And we have a few others coming up for the rest of the spring. So definitely keep an eye on that. summerassociatehub.com/events to sign up. We're also in the process of planning an in-person networking opportunity in New York, so stay tuned on that. All right, upcoming showcases. Next week, we have our Philadelphia location showcase. We have finance and capital markets practice. The following week, we have Southern California location showcase, some firms in LA and Orange County, and as well as private equity fund formation. So keep an eye on all of those. We'll pop the link in the chat to sign up. All right, so that was a quick intro. I want to make sure we have enough time to hear from our wonderful panelists. So instead of me introducing everyone, I'll leave it to them. So Stefanie, let's start with you. Introduce yourself, your practice, and briefly why you chose to be a real estate attorney.
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Stefanie Brennan. I'm a partner in the real estate group at Troutman Pepper. I sit in Pittsburgh, although I started my career in Philadelphia, so a bigger city starting point, transferred home a few years ago. I do transactional real estate, primarily leasing, both tenant side, representing tenants, and landlord side, but all different types of leasing. So office, retailers, industrial, warehouse, pretty much the gamut. I also represent developers buying and selling land, developing land, building on land, all those sorts of the whole spectrum really of land from dirt to construction. But we can get into that in more detail later.
And why did you choose to be a real estate attorney?
Oh, why did I choose real estate? I had a chance when I was a summer associate to try lots of different practice groups. I knew I wanted to do transactional, and I really liked real estate because it was a more focused transactional group as compared to like corporate and securities or with some of the bigger financial services groups. It was a more specific subject matter that I really liked.
Great. Thanks for that, Stefanie. Simon, on to you.
Hey, thank you, Albert. Thanks for the intro and for having us. So my name is Simon Elkharrat. I'm a partner in the real estate group at Fried Frank. I'm in New York. I was also a summer associate at Fried Frank, so this has been my one and only law firm, and it's been an amazing time being here. My practice is similar to Stephanie. I'm a generalist. I do acquisitions, dispositions, so purchases and sales, leasing, ground leasing, which we can also talk about later, a little complicated, financing, joint ventures, so partnerships in real estate. So pretty much all facets of transactional real estate other than lender side finance and land use. The group here is the reason why I picked real estate. So like I said, I was a summer associate here, and like Stephanie, I had the ability to try different practice areas when I was a summer associate. It was two things. It was, first of all, it was just the people in the real estate group here, and sort of the nature of the people in real estate and the way they interact on their deals, and our clients and real estate developers, and how they are in the world and how they act in the world is just a little bit different than corporate type players. But then honestly, the true answer is, when I was a summer associate, I was working on a project in Times Square, and I was walking on the street with my wife, and I was like looking at the building and talking about, the blade and the this and the that, and she was like, whatever. But that was the most exciting thing, was to really see and feel the work that I was doing, and that was what did it for me, because it's so tangible and fun to deal with in that sense.
Fantastic. It's a very common theme that I've noticed from speaking with real estate attorneys. Andrew, on to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Demirchyan. I'm senior counsel at Matkins, based in LA, but I also work a lot in our San Francisco office. I originally started in San Francisco at Matkins. I have a national practice in commercial real estate transactions. More than half of my work is actually real estate finance. So that would include lender side representation and also borrower side representation, inclusive of doing a lot of work for loan servicers on the servicer side, representing lenders. And then the other half is the purchase and sale aspect, the acquisitions and dispositions, similar to what Simon mentioned, and also leasing. I also like to say there's just the bucket of sort of all the other stuff you do for the clients as they want, things like various management agreements, licensing agreements, parking agreements, sort of all the other ancillary things that fit into a real estate practice. And why I chose to be a real estate lawyer. So I was in real estate on the brokerage and business side for about 8 years before law school. So I had a really extensive career on the business side of it. And I was working with lawyers like myself that were running the deals. And I really was interested in going to law school and pursuing this aspect of the career, because a part of me was always a scholar and less interested on the business side. So anyway, so that really has given me a lot of color into the work that I do at Matkins, and then market knowledge and all that comes in. So yeah.
Fantastic. And just a reminder to everyone, we just sent a bunch of links in the chat, including the links to the breakout rooms for you to meet the attorneys and the recruiting team members afterwards. So make sure to save that document and use those links afterwards. Okay, so Simon, we'll start with you. Tell us in more detail, what are the typical matters you'd work on in your day-to-day as a real estate attorney in New York?
So on a typical day, or a typical work week, I might be working on the sale of a property and a refinancing of another property. And sometimes the cool thing is when those all mesh together. So you might be working on a transaction where your client is buying a building, and at the same time they're going to finance that acquisition. So they have to get a loan in order to make that purchase happen. And who knows, they might be doing a joint venture with a partner to buy that together. And the exciting thing about being a generalist is to be able to really be involved in all parts of those transactions. So at any given time, I'd say I have, I don't know, between 2 and 12 things going on, depending on how busy things are. And I think my day fills up, I spend a good amount of time on the phone or on the Zoom, whether that's with our client going through issues, or whether that's with the other side, another law firm, kind of negotiating those issues. We spend some of our time, marking up and drafting documents or reviewing documents and preparing to have those conversations. And then there's, I think, sort of like the ancillary, everything else, whether that's training our associates and spending time going over things with associates so that we're training, whether that's sort of group, we had like a group lunch today where we just had a department lunch and everyone got together in a room and just had lunch together. Or client development events is sort of another bucket of time that I spend.
Great. So Andrew, tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day working as a real estate attorney in California.
Yeah, for me, I would say right now, two typical kinds of matters that I'm seeing come up a lot in my deals here in California. One of them is I have a lot of developers I'm working with that are parceling and they're building parcels and buying just whether it's city blocks or certain, certain areas of a particular suburb for development. So whether it's multifamily or R&D. So right now I'm working on a handful of those transactions. I think total I have about 15 transactions going. And so it's also market driven because the volume isn't necessarily there as it was like in years before where interest rates were low. So people were buying and selling office buildings, retail. So there's still a lot of capital out there that's, like I said, working on just the core development piece, especially trying to fit into the different sort of housing needs that we have in California. So that's been one big set of work that I'm typically doing nowadays. And then the other set of it is a lot of work in the life science and pharma space. So I have clients that are buying and selling, whether it's in the San Diego area or in the San Francisco Bay Area, just different R&D facilities for just various pharma uses, research. Anyway, so that's typical of what I do.
Great. And Stefanie, on to you. So we're curious to hear more about your day-to-day as a real estate attorney in Pittsburgh. Also curious to hear more about your work on sustainability, as I understand that's an interesting part of your practice.
Sure. So a typical day, I do a lot of leasing. So at any given time, I might have 10 leases in various phases. So whether you're doing an initial draft or an initial markup, if you're on the tenant side, so you get in the draft from the landlord and you take the time, you mark it up. Maybe you have a call with your client to discuss, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and then you sit down and you edit it. Or if you're further down the line in the process, you've traded a few drafts, maybe I'll get on the call by myself with the other side's lawyer and we'll talk through, here's the points, can we come to terms? And then another big piece of my practice that I didn't discuss earlier, that's not, it's real estate, but it's not maybe the traditional real estate that we've discussed, is I do real estate support on corporate deals. So anytime my colleagues in the M&A space are, their client is acquiring a company, buying the stock, doing a merger. If there's any sort of real estate involved, whether they own real estate or they're just a party to a bunch of leases, somebody either needs to, read the leases, see what they say, make sure they say what they think they say. Do we need to go and get a landlord consent in order to assign the lease to the buyer entity? I might draft those consents. And then if there's owned real property, it's almost like your typical true real estate acquisition deal where you as the real estate specialist on that deal are reviewing title, survey, all of those things to make sure that, the property is what your client thinks it's going to be and you get the insurance and everything else you would need. The sustainability piece that Albert mentioned is I'm a LEED certified green associate. So I have a general working knowledge. Typically anybody who's getting a green certification on their building, whether it's, silver, gold, platinum now, they hire specialists to do that level of paperwork. But I feel like it's a good thing to have a lawyer involved who has at least a working knowledge of the language being used, what's mandatory, what's kind of can be tweaked with the wording in a lease or in your covenants and those sorts of things.
Fantastic. And so as students probably have noticed over the last couple of minutes, there are a lot of different sub-practices within subcategories within real estate work, including acquisition and sale, or what is oftentimes called, dirt law, finance, development, leasing, M&A support, which Stefanie mentioned as well. So I guess, Simon, tell us briefly about what a practice involving the acquisition and sale of property or dirt law means and how that differs from those other areas.
Yeah, so I actually think of dirt law as all of the above. I think of dirt law, so sometimes they call real estate lawyers dirt lawyers. And that's because we're dealing with like the property, the dirt. And so the acquisition and the sale of the property, the financing of the property, the development of the property, construction agreements that go into all that is sort of dirt work, as opposed to what I think of as like corporate work, which is entity transfers, entity sales, or even more broader company or portfolio sales and portfolio financings and the like. In terms of how people specialize in those areas, it all sort of depends on folks. I think there are people out there who are specialists in one specific area and are pros in them, right? So you have lawyers who only do lender side finance, and they're fantastic at that, and they're so skilled. Some lawyers only do leasing, and that is their practice. And then you have folks who are generalists, who are also spend enough time doing each of everything that they're able to master it, but still able to sort of broaden their skill set. So I think you find both of those in the industry.
So being a dirt lawyer is not a derogatory term. It's a
No, I don't think so at all. It's definitely funny, but it's definitely used.
Yes. So Andrew, as you mentioned before, a large part of your practice revolves around real estate finance. So tell us more about that and how that differs from other areas.
Yeah, I mean, the finance piece is, where's the money coming from who, and who's representing them. So essentially you'll have a buyer and seller on a piece of property, and then you'll have a lender coming in to finance that property. So depending on what kind of an asset it is, if it's a development or what, it'll be either your typical, commercial mortgage loan. It could be what we call a mezzanine loan, which could be akin to like a second mortgage. And then it could be a construction loan, because I have developers right now, like I had mentioned earlier, that are parceling just different plots of land, and then they're tying them together. And then there's a construction loan piece involved, and then we'll work on a construction loan. And then after the building is constructed and finished, then we would work on what's called a permanent financing, which is your typical mortgage loan. Another big part of the finance world that I'm in a lot is I work with a lot of loan servicers. So I represent the lender in that context. And given the market right now, I've worked on quite a bit of loan modifications, just given the general context of what's going on. For example, modifying different loan terms on hotels. I've seen quite a bit of that recently. And so there's that entire piece. And that's typically what the finance world involves.
Great. So Stefanie, tell us a little bit more about a part of your practice is within real estate development. I'm curious to hear more about that type of work and how that differs from other areas too.
Yeah, and it sort of almost bridges both what Simon and Andrew were talking about. So development is really, you start with the dirt, the dirt layers. And it can even be what Andrew was referring to, where he has clients that are parceling them together. So, you buy a couple lots near each other, then you go out and you have to get approvals from the county, the municipality, the city, depending where you are, to either combine them, or maybe you keep them separate, or maybe you make them a condominium, or there's lots of different ways you can do it, but you need approvals to do that. And then you need approvals to build anything on that. And then you need approvals to connect those to roads. So development clients, development law, you often get to see these projects from the beginning of, just an idea of what could I put on this piece of land. And then, you go out, you start to get your permits, your approvals, your land development plans, all those things. You probably need some financing and money to do this. So you talk to Andrew, and then you construct, and then oftentimes the end goal is to flip it, to sell it, or maybe to lease it out and then sell it. So it really runs the gamut of all the different transactional kind of practices of real estate law.
Great. So Stefanie, we'll stick with you for the next question too. So the 1L is shifting focus more towards the law student's experience versus the current real estate lawyer's experience. So the 1L curriculum is very litigation focused, as we mentioned earlier. I guess, what can a 1L do to learn more and prepare for a career in real estate?
Yeah, I think anybody listening to this is already doing a great first step. You're definitely ahead of where I was as a 1L. It's hard because the classes you're taking in your first year, you're just not going to get a real sense of what it's like for what we do on a day-to-day basis. So definitely, seek out professionals who, are in the space, come to these sorts of sessions. I think, looking into scheduling when you get to schedule for next fall, if any time you can take, a practical class, those I would highly recommend, because really any of your standard classes, even if you take, property 2, I know is an option, or at least I had that as an option. It's still taught from a litigation angle and case law angle. So it's still not really getting to the heart of what we do. It doesn't even have to be a real estate kind of focused course. It could just be any sort of transactional where you're drafting and, maybe you interview a client and you take notes and then you negotiate, because it's just a very different skill set than litigation.
I'm just gonna jump in. It's just because it's so important. I 100% agree. I took a private equity class in law school. It happened to be taught by Fried Frank partners, but the point is that every class was just like about their daily practice. And real estate is so cool, but it's not that different from other transactional practices. So like we do the dirt stuff, yes, but if you think about real estate compared to corporate, right? Real estate is almost like a microcosm of corporate. When we're buying and selling buildings, think about that like a little bit like M&A. And when there's real estate finance, think about that a little bit like I guess capital markets or corporate finance. And JVs, joint ventures, can sort of be thought about as private equity. And so if you think about it from that perspective, transactional work isn't all that different than real estate. It's just the asset that's transacting. So taking these 2 credit classes are so valuable and will teach you so much about what a transactional lawyer does. And then making the jump to real estate is not that hard.
Yeah, and if I could just jump into from my
please.
perspective, when I was in law school, I did a class on secure transactions, which was super helpful. It was one of those 2-unit seminar type classes. I actually had one on like the Federal Reserve and the regulations, which was super helpful in the banking side of things. And then more of like the core stuff, I would say anything in corporations, business associations, that was super helpful, because most of everything that's owned in real estate is it's done through a special purpose entity that's formed to specifically hold the asset, and or also the same thing with a lot of loans. And so really, I would say big portion of my work is understanding the corporate side of it, and that was super helpful. And even because I do a lot of work on the loan servicing side, I would say wills and trusts was helpful, because that whole structure of servicing is a trust model with a trustee and bondholders that are the beneficiaries. So anyway, those were classes that I thought were super helpful and relevant for what I do now.
Yeah, and I think, and something I'm noticing is a common theme. I mean, real estate touches on so many different areas. So it sounds like not only focusing on real estate specific classes, but just getting a well-rounded experience in law school to learn about different transactional practices. And I know one thing I'll add from my own experience, if your law school offers the opportunity to take classes in other schools in the university, like the business school, that's a great thing to take advantage of. I took a real estate class in the business school of where I went to law school. I didn't do very well, but I thought it was a very interesting class. And I definitely learned a lot of terminology and the basic concepts about commercial real estate, which I would have never really gotten into otherwise. So all great insights. So I guess let's stick on this topic a little bit. Outside of school itself, what are some resources that law students or young attorneys can use to just learn and stay updated on the real estate industry?
I'm happy to take it. I mean, there's some publications out there and sort of online resources. So I don't know if anyone's heard of The Real Deal. That is, I don't know, call it like a half blog, half news, but really news, because they basically report a lot on real estate happenings and transactions that happen in New York, in Florida. I think they have, for the West Coast too, it's their own page, although I know I haven't really dove into that, but I do a lot of work in New York and in Florida and across country, but the national work, but the leasing work I do is in New York and Florida. And so it's really helpful to see some of that there. And I think the other thing that I like to do is I have sort of a Google, what do you call it? Like those notifications. And anytime the New York Times and the New York Post post in the real estate sections, I get a notification. I put in some hot words in terms of that would trigger real estate, mega financing or whatever it is, and I get some hits when articles get published. That's another way you can stay on top of it. And Cranes too is another good publication that writes on real estate.
I can also chime in here. I think in terms of just industry, there's a lot of good industry organizations out there that do a lot of great presentations and seminars and events where they're either really reduced fees for law students or are absolutely free. So one of them is the Urban Land Institute. It's really great. In California, NAIOP is huge. I highly recommend folks look into NAIOP. with all the different programs that they offer. Actually, I was going to mention Real Deal Simon as well. I actually love the information I get from there. They have a lot in LA on the West Coast. It's become for me a really good way of sort of taking a pulse on what's happening nationally too. And then also Up is now is another really great organization. They put on a lot of great things. There's a lot of good content. And I think it's just great to just generally show up and network, whether it's with lawyers or developers or other people. I mean, I know I do that when I go to these events, and there's always law students there as well. So
Yeah, I echo NAOP. It's great. I also do CREW, which is a women's focused commercial real estate group. And most of these organizations also have, young people's division that they all have different names, but under 40 basically divisions. So you'd be meeting a lot of your peers, and a lot of your peers who aren't in law school are already in the working world. So it doesn't hurt to start networking with them now as they are launching their careers as brokers or lenders or, whatever the case may be.
This is
if I
super
could,
helpful. Fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. Yeah,
if
please.
I could just jump in, there's one more organization I forgot, just that's finance specific. Commercial Real Estate Finance Council is great. I do a lot with them, CREFC. So they have a lot of great resources for law students, lots of free stuff posted at different law firms to learn about the industry. So I highly recommend that as well.
And a great event every year.
Great. This is super helpful. So I guess moving back to the practice side of things a little bit and just kind of thinking about the career trajectory. Obviously when students join firms, the goal is that everyone would stay forever. But obviously that's not always the case. And oftentimes students will then join a law firm as associates, stay for however long and move on to another point of their career. That's oftentimes referred to as exit opportunities, and something that's important to think about as a law student and also as a junior lawyer is what are your exit opportunities? What are the opportunities that you're setting yourself up for in your next step of your career? Curious to hear from all of you. What are some, and before we move on to the Q&A from some of the audience, what are some common exit opportunities for real estate attorneys within your specialty or office location?
So, I mean, there's really two main buckets, right? It's in-house counsel is something that happens quite often. And then there are also people that go to the business side. And so we have, and we, by the way, so I disagree. I think people can stay at law firms forever because I like to think that that's me. But in case people want to go out of the law firm world, honestly, law firms love it because then you go in-house to a client and you strengthen that relationship. And so we all the time are helping associates who don't want to be at a law firm forever to try to find that next step because it's only mutually beneficial. And so we place people all the time. And then you do find people who start to work in real estate and just feel like they want to be on the business side and try to make that transition. It's not easy unless you have that business background, but some people are able to do it. I mean, one of my mentors and now a very close friend and client, went over to JVP and is one of our biggest lending side clients. And he spent the time, took the exams to be a trader, went over to JP Morgan, stayed there for a bit, and then found his own opportunity and is flourishing. So that happens too.
Great. I guess moving from the business side, moving from the law side to the business side is the, I guess, the reverse of Andrew's career. Anything to add there, Stefanie or Andrew?
I think most commonly I've seen, like Simon pointed out, a lot of our associates who, want something different than a big law career end up going to clients. I mean, really good clients, which is great because then I still get to work with them and talk with them and like Simon said, strengthen that relationship. But I haven't seen it too often that they move to the pure business side. But some of the clients, it's where, a smaller development client, being an in-house lawyer there is almost akin to being on the business side because they really expect you to, bring some of, the both the legal knowledge and then also the business acumen to it.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd like to add is I've seen some folks also go into like asset and property management too, which is, mostly hardcore business side, but they usually have some kind of an experience in that. But I've seen that as well and echo on everything Stefanie and Simon said. I've seen all of that at Matkins as well.
Right. And Simon, I should clarify, I didn't say people can't stay forever. I just said not everybody does. So of course, if you're enjoying your time at a law firm, you are, trying to stay as long as you can is always a good thing. All right, so let's take a couple questions from the crowd. This is a really good question. I think going a one layer deeper from what we've already talked about. If anyone can elaborate on the day-to-day differences in representing the borrowers versus the creditors in a financing, we'd love to hear about that.
I think you have the right audience or panel for it because Andrew spends his time representing lenders and Stefanie and myself seem to be on the borrower side, but Stefanie, I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but I think that's what I'm feeling. Yeah. So, look, I mean, it's different and it's not, right? And so, it's different in the sense that you're from the borrower's perspective, your client is trying to either finance an acquisition, finance a construction, refinance out existing loans, and keep their property from producing and keep their property healthy and be able to make returns, right? The lender is making a very different type of investment. The lender is loaning money, trying to make a return on their money, and everything that Andrew does representing his clients, but I'll let Andrew speak for himself, but everything Andrew does is to button up and to make sure that that in all instances, the lender is able to get to reap their returns. And so when as a borrower's counsel, my job is to protect the borrower in the sense that I want to make sure that once they close this loan, they can operate the property the way they normally operate the property, that if things go wrong and it's just not their doing, it's just the way the world works, is notwithstanding their good efforts, that okay, so the lender's collateral is lender's collateral, but the lender doesn't come after the borrower for anything more. And where it gets really complicated is on the tough financings, which are really construction financings. Those get much more complicated because those properties, unlike an operating property, those properties don't have cash coming out of it, right? And so what the lender is going to foreclose on and what the lenders basing their loan on is not what the asset is today, it's what the asset will be in 4 years when you build that thing. And if the lender has to foreclose somewhere in between, how do you get them to a place where they get their investment? And so to get there, you have to give certain guarantees, and this gets just incredibly complicated in terms of what the borrower needs to offer, what the lender would be okay with, and striking a middle ground. The last thing I'll say is it really depends on who's at the table. So when I say that, I mean, you could have big time institutional developers and you can have a small family office really developing the same project, but the terms that the big time institutional developer will get are going to be very different than what the small office, family office will get, just because of market presence, volume, track record, force, connections, all of those things. And for good or for bad, I get the benefit of representing both types of borrowers. And sometimes it's a little bit of a shock in a good and bad way when you find yourself trying to negotiate like you would for a macro giant developer for the smaller developer and having to realize not everyone's going to get the same terms. And that's just an interesting dynamic that happens.
And if I can just chime in too, I mean, I think Simon really was able to summarize it really well. I would just add in one more thing from a lender's perspective is lenders really just want to know if things are going to go really bad and I have to step in and manage this asset. What's my exit strategy? And do I have everything in place right now at close? So for example, I mean, I had mentioned working on hotels or hotel modifications I've done deals where I'm representing a lender lending on a hotel, and there's a lot of other documents that come in where the lender needs, whether it's, to make sure they get the franchise agreement assigned or comfort letters and different things from the hotel franchisor, thinking, well, I have to put all this in place. If one day, if something were to go really bad, that I have to step in and I have to run this place and eventually sell it. And one other thing is really, there's a lot more scrutiny with respect to how many fees and how much money is being pulled out of the property and how many layers of that is being pulled out and sort of who and what and how it's being paid. So really understanding all that is super helpful for the lender because it feeds into the existing underwriting on the business side that they've already done. So I've seen a lot of creative things come across my desk and trying to understand, well, all right, is this another fee? Where is this coming from? How much more? And so that's a little bit more of color on that piece.
Great. I know we're running out of time. This is a really good question, so I want to make sure we cover it, and I think it's helpful for law students to get a sense of this. So does your work specifically tie to the office location that you're in, or do you work on projects that are spread across the United States? I think we've seen in a couple of the other sessions that we've had previously, litigation and M&A, for example, one of the common themes was the location that you work in is not really that strongly tied to the actual clients or deals you're working on. So curious what that's like from your experience.
Yeah, so mine definitely does not, just because I started in a different office. So anything that I started with was Philadelphia centric, but even there, we had some local, maybe 50% local clients and then 50% nationwide. A lot of clients, expect you to handle their nationwide portfolio. So even if they're headquartered in, the city where you sit, that doesn't mean all their leases are. And then we engage with local counsel where there's, state specific stuff that we would need to have that knowledge. Now that I work from Pittsburgh, it's even less tied to my location because so much of my clients are historic from my Philadelphia days, or just because it's just the nature of being at a large firm that has the reputation, has offices nationwide. I might get a call from a California partner who has a client that needs a lease done, and I can do that just as well from Pittsburgh as somebody sitting in LA can. Well, for the most part.
I would say in terms of my practice, half of it's based in California, the other half is everywhere else in the country. And right now I have transactions in the Pacific Northwest and Texas, Georgia. I have one in New Jersey. So but I would say if I had to split it, it's half in California, half is national. And then I pull in local counsel to help me on any specifics I need from a lender's perspective in that state, or a seller, depending on what party I'm representing.
Simon, you're on mute.
I knew I was going to do that at one point. I would say my experience is similar, with the only caveat being Fried Frank's has a very good land use practice. And so one of the reasons why we do so much development work in New York City is because part of what we do, like if you look at Manhattan West, for example, or Hudson Yards, all of these like macro developments in New York City, those were things that started with Fried Frank on the land use side, working with the clients to obtain this like macro zoning or bid from the city. And that started as a land use matter, and it continues as a land use matter, but over time grows as an acquisition matter, and then financing matters, and then leasing comes out of that stuff. And so a lot of the development work that we do ties to New York because we work together with our land use team. So I think that's just sort of like a little spin. Otherwise, most of what I do is outside of I'd say half of what I do is outside New York. And just to answer one of the other kind of questions, like I don't even think you need to. When you're doing acquisitions or financings, I don't think being at the property or seeing the property is all that helpful or necessary. I do think while it doesn't happen all the time, if you're doing a lease, especially on the tenant side, really understanding the nature of the space sometimes can be very helpful. But it doesn't always happen, and you're not able to always get there. So it's cool when you can do that.
That's super helpful. So I guess let's quickly wrap up our last question. And while we ask this question, we're also going to do our raffle prizes. So I guess we'll go one at a time. My favorite question is now is everyone's chance to plug the firm. So in 30 seconds or less, why should someone choose your firm? I will say those who have been on our sessions the last few weeks know our rule here at Summer Associate Hub is you cannot say it's the people. And the reason for that is because, as 1Ls will see as they go through the process, this spring and summer, the answer seems to always be it's the people. Something that we can never figure out is how every firm has the best people. So that can't be the answer. Something else. So Stefanie, let's start with you. 30 seconds or less.
So
why should a student choose Troutman?
it's not the people, although it is the people. It is how our firm treats the people. I already said I was previously in Philadelphia. I've actually been in 3 different offices. I've been in a suburban Philadelphia, main Philadelphia, and now Pittsburgh. I've also been in 2 practice groups. The point is that Troutman Pepper values its people and wants to make sure that they are positioned for success. And so, when I went to my practice group leader and said, I want to move up to Pittsburgh, they made it happen. When I wasn't happy in corporate, they allowed me to move to real estate. And, that's one example, but it happens all the time. We have career coaching, we have we put the effort into the associates to have them be a success because we really do care about the people.
Very lawyerly threading the needle on it's the people out, but it's acceptable. All right, so Troutman has sponsored a Troutman branded Yeti mug, which is always a good one, plus an Amazon gift card. It's Darlene Radichelle, if you're with us, just let me know in the Q&A if you're with us, Darlene. All right, moving on. Simon, 30 seconds or less. Why should a student choose Free Frank?
Yeah, I won't try to be a lawyer. I won't even go there. I'll say if you're in this Q&A, then you're interested in real estate. And if you're interested in real estate, I think real estate is Free Frank is the best place to work because of just the nature of the transactions we work on and the complexity of them. Some of the most interesting, unique things that come out of real estate come from deals that we do. And honestly, most of what I work on, I often say is bespoke and sort of like not done before. I almost never have sort of a precedent to work on because a lot of the complex issues that we're dealing with are like brand new and being created on the go, which is all very scary, but really, really cool. And so you just get a very diverse, interesting, complex background here. And I guess I can't talk about the people, so that's all I'll say.
All right, very good. So we have a Free Frank sponsored Free Frank swag outdoor blanket, which is always a good one. Krista Domini, if you're with us, let me know in the Q&A. Krista Domini. All right, Andrew, finish us off.
Yeah.
30 seconds or less.
Absolutely. So in most firms, real estate is an offshoot practice that supports every other practice group that the firm has. Allen Matkins, it's the flip side of that because at our core, we are a real estate firm with an extremely deep bench and knowledge. And so every other practice group we have really funnels into and supports real estate. So if you want to really be somewhere that real estate is at the core of it, that's what really sets us apart. And the fact that we have our national practice. And I know I can't talk about people, but the culture is also great. And if you look at the fact that most of our people have been here for forever, it's not necessarily a revolving door. So that's another thing. It was helpful for me 6 years ago when I joined, and it's still the same now. So.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. So Alan Matkins sponsored gift card. Natalie Baldacci, if you're with us, let us know in the Q&A as soon as possible. And thanks everybody for joining. This was a really insightful, fantastic discussion. Just another reminder to everybody, the attorneys who are with us are taking time out of their evening to join us also in the breakout rooms. It's a great way to ask some follow-up questions, get to know them. They'll also be joined by the recruiting team members at the firm, so you could ask about different things related to the summer program and other recruiting functions within the firm. So definitely take advantage of it and join us. The Word document that we posted in the chat has all the breakout room links, so please save that document before this webinar ends right now if you haven't already. If you have any trouble with the Zoom links for the breakout rooms or the Word document, just respond to our email that you got before the session, and we can address that pretty quickly for you. Well, anyway, thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and thanks to our wonderful panelists for this really nice discussion. Again, summerassociatehub.com/events to join our future programs, and I hope you could join us in the breakout rooms. One thing I like to always mention is don't squat in the breakout rooms. It's always nice to hear different perspectives. So if you have the time, it's always great to move around and hear from the different attorneys at the different firms. Well, thanks again for our fantastic panel, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.